Hi, my name is Melanie Christmas, and this is Sandy, third grade teacher. I'm working on my ESL endorsement, Georgetown College, and Sandy and I have been collaborating on a lesson that she's using with her third graders, and I'm helping her modify the lesson for her EL students. So, okay, so let's begin with um, our friend Eli.
Okay.
We're going to look at his PSP. When we look at his PSP, based on the access that he took January of last school year, he scored listening was a 4.0, which is it's good, especially given his age and how long he's been in the U.S. Developing, um, his writing was a 3.1. His reading was a 3.2. Speaking was a 2.3. So his overall literacy was a 3.1, and oral was a 3.0. His composite level, which is a combination of all of these, was a 3.1. To
Okay.
test out of access in the state of Kentucky is a 4.5.
Okay.
So he is developing and expanding well. Um, Based on these scores and how you've mentioned in the classroom that his scores on the beginning of the year test were lower than what they were at the end of the year last year.
Mm-hmm.
And based on these scores, I feel justified in that we mentioned talking about having a reader for him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if based on his performance, I think that that's okay. Go ahead and we've given him an instructional accommodation of a reader for now.
Okay.
And he has to have a reader
And
for.
explaining some of the vocabulary that I'm reading with him.
Yes. That all of these instructional accommodations,
Okay.
this PSYOP, which I have a blog actually.
Oh,
And so
interesting.
on the blog, I actually have a link to site that explains the sheltered classroom, kind of some things that you can do in the classroom to help meet the needs of the EL kids.
Awesome.
So all of the sheltered classroom accommodations are included. They're in here, and then I'll give you a link to that.
Awesome.
And then we
Thank you.
can talk more about that further. But also for testing accommodations, in order for him to use those, like he
Mm-hmm.
has to use them in the classroom all year.
Sure.
So that includes extended time
Mm-hmm.
just for processing, reading assessments to him,
Sure.
and not reading assessments like star reading.
Right.
He
Right.
doesn't get a reader for that. And simplifying the language, which simplifying the language doesn't mean like dumbing it down.
Right.
It means breaking it down
Yeah.
and you actually do a really good job of that in your classroom, I've noticed.
Okay,
So
thank you.
just breaking it down.
Sure.
You're welcome. But I wanted to point out the can-do descriptors.
Mm-hmm.
WIDA gives can-do descriptors, and there's so much of when you think about an EL student what they can't do, and the can-do is kind of based on his level that he scored here. What are the things that you can expect he is able to do? So comparing, contrasting objects, their physical attributes, locating objects, figures, places, based on visuals from an oral description. So just listening, he should be able to do those things.
Good. Good.
Speaking, he does still have, an accent, as you know. So helping him with that would be having real life, like realia, like conversations about real things, peers with you,
Mm-hmm.
in large groups, small group, because Eli's so shy. You always put him in small groups and one-on-one, and I think that's a great accommodation for him because he's not going to speak. Personality has nothing to do with language.
Mm-hmm.
It's his personality.
Right. Right.
So yeah, being in small groups, but giving him a real purpose to talk,
Okay.
not just talking for talking, but
Sure.
that's
a good
makes it
idea.
helpful. Yeah, meaningful
Yeah.
talk, really.
Right.
So
Very good idea.
reading, I guess like when you're doing read alouds, making a real strong like thinking aloud of the text to self connections.
Okay.
That helps him make connections kind of modeling for him how to make those connections to his own life,
Sure.
which helps, memory and everything too.
Helps them understand a little bit better.
Right. Sorting illustrated content words. Illustrated meaning more picture, more pictures. And you do a really good job of using visuals in your classroom. So I know that that's very helpful for him. In his writing, it's the other thing, the lesson that you gave me that we'll get into here in a second. You did a great job setting that up for him. I know you had already prepared the kids for it, but you had the graphic organizer in the center. You had the rubric in the center, and they had already used those things. So I have a couple suggestions there too, but
Good.
otherwise,
The more suggestions, the better.
okay, I appreciate that. So instructional accommodations, we touched on those a little bit, and we can talk about those some more. And then testing accommodations. But let's look at the lesson.
Sure.
Your lesson, you asked me to help you with accommodating for modifications for centers, which I thought was great because center time they're kind of independent. So
Do you want to tell them exactly what the lesson's about first? Or,
you and I, no, it's okay.
okay.
Yeah, it's all right. So
Excuse me.
Your lesson plan for your center lessons and involved characteristics of fairy tales and inferring. The only thing I noticed you might want to with the I can statements, you wrote them on the board. I can identify characteristics of fairy tales, and you went over kind of what characteristics were. And then I can use inferencing skills and schema to understand literature and comprehend what is read. For EL students, fewer academic terms sometimes because they get so hung up.
Right.
The academic language is difficult. Maybe just narrowing in on exactly what terms, inferring was your goal. Not necessarily the schema, if that was something they were doing, but maybe just rewording it, making it a little more precise. It's helpful for them, as well as like really concretely explaining the terms. And you did a great job with that, with
Like
the characteristics.
What do you remember of the character, maybe? Something
Yes.
like that.
Yes. Kind of more kid friendly.
Right.
Yeah. Which I know.
Great idea.
Yeah. And I know that
It's something you don't think about as a teacher.
yeah.
And you just throw up those terms. That's
Right.
a good idea.
Well, sometimes I think we get so hung up on making sure that we're getting the vocabulary up there for the adults who are seeing it.
That's true, too.
Sometimes.
That's right.
But just thinking about from an EL perspective, for Eli, that's just a lot of terminology that he might miss what he's capable of getting, just getting caught up in it.
I appreciate you reminding me of that too. That's a very good point.
Thank you. And I really like how you wrote them on the board. And then you also said them orally. That's a great way to make sure he's not only working on his listening, but his visual. EL students need a lot of visuals, so that helps. So then you went into the skill. You read this story, Why Dogs Wag Their Tails. And one thing that I wanted to suggest, and I added a link here because it's nothing that I would have been familiar with, but I like the folktale. I like the folktale that you used. One thing that you could do, because he is Cambodian, is choose a folktale that's from the Cambodian culture.
Great idea.
Yeah, so I found some online that were kid friendly. I looked at, make sure there's nothing inappropriate, and I included that just a suggestion if you want to check those out.
That would be awesome.
Just since it's folk tales and you can use any kind with the standard,
That's
maybe
right.
using one for him, it kind of gives him something to connect to. The text to self connections, and plus it gives the other kids a little bit of culture.
Exactly.
I can
Something
maybe
he's familiar with too.
Yeah,
maybe
maybe that would open him up to talking a little bit about it, maybe sharing. If not, that's okay too. But he tends to drift off, we know, as it is. So that might keep him a little more engaged, just because it's something that he can relate to. Also, using think aloud strategy as you're reading it kind of models for him how he can make those text connections to self, and then scaffolding the vocabulary, which you do really, really good job of that. One other thing would be, and it's just a suggestion, but using a graphic organizer
Mhm.
or something visual as you're talking about. He has the pictures to look at, but when you were talking about inferring and vocabulary, sometimes having another visual
Mhm.
helps them. So
Sure.
yeah. So moving into the centers, your centers were really organized and really well managed and run. Like I was really impressed. Um, sorry, nonsense. So one thing that I wanted to point out, you had the group gathering, this skill paper
Uh-huh.
where they had to cut and paste and match the text clue with the inference.
Mhm.
And it looks like this. One suggestion might be for EL, it's a lot of word, which is, it's fine. You can break it down and read it. The text is not too difficult at all. But another just suggestion might be a hands-on activity. And there's something